May you live in interesting times.
The beginning of great changes.
Uncertainty.
Probably the calmest year in the next 10 years. It's just the beginning.
The question is, which Donald Trump are we going to see?
I would go with the electric vehicle market, and then we'll see how that unfolds over 2025 and further on.
The Chat Lounge. Chat Lounge.
Chat Lounge.
The Chat Lounge unpacks views and opinions on hot issues in a more casual way.
Welcome to the Chat Lounge. I'm Tuyun. As we approach the end of 2024, let's review the key dynamics that have shaped and may continue to shape the trajectory of global events and trends. Joining our discussion are Harvey Dzodin, Senior Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, Mike Bastin, Senior Lecturer, University of Southampton, UK, and Dr. Qiang, Fellow of the Belt and Road Research Center, Minzu, University of China. It's great to have you all back on the show to discuss the past year. It's been a year already. How time flies. So first of all, how would you summarize the past year in one phrase? Shall we begin with Harvey?
Oh, sure. Well, I would say I think you could summarize it in the ancient Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times.
That's quite precise. And Mike?
I think to be very concise, probably the word uncertainty.
I remember last year, one of you also used this word uncertainty. And Dr. Chu, please?
Well, I think the summarization for this year is the beginning of great changes.
Right, a new beginning. But with a lot of uncertainties, of course. Then what were the most memorable moments or events for each of you, Dr. Chu?
Well, there's so many, actually. According to Chinese feng shui, I think for the heavenly and the earthly branches, this is called the Jia Chen year. Jia stands for the wood, and the Chen stands for the dragon. So it's a wooden dragon here. So basically, it's the Chen also stands for the earth. So basically, the wood will also, come from the earth. So it kills the earth. So what we call is the heaven clashes with the earth. In the history, when you encountered such a yearly mark, the Jia Chen, it always marks something with a disaster, but also started with a great changes, great uncertainty. That's the reason why we see this year, well, very coincidentally, it changes everywhere. 70% of the population welcomes their grand election. Geopolitical conflicts everywhere, not only last from the previous years, but also new geopolitical conflicts and wars are happening, for example, in Syria, for example, in the Palestine area. So all the kind of the issues are happening, and also we've been seeing the natural disasters, turbulent through a whole year, as well as we've been seeing in many countries, extreme left and extreme right, when political parties started to get into the position, military coup, finished or unfinished, are happening. So I think this is a year of the great changes. But don't worry about it. This is probably the calmest year in the next 10 years. It's just the beginning. So I think there are many memorable moments just to begin with. And the next year and the year after next year, we're going to see more of the great shows.
Yeah, hopefully it's a good show instead of clashes or wars. Thanks for the traditional Chinese lesson. And then, Mike, your most memorable moments.
I think putting a UK perspective on things is probably the general election and Keir Starmer's election as Labour Prime Minister in the summer. First Labour Prime Minister since Gordon Brown in 2010. So that was quite a change, quite an upheaval, and quite a major election victory, which brought in a very diverse parliament, set of MPs, and all sorts of issues. On a sporting front, the Paris Olympics, great memories, great events, a tremendous event as it always is. Coming back to my own field, diversity of Chinese sponsors as well, Chinese corporate sponsors at the Paris Olympics. But I think the UK general election and the Labour government in the summer.
Right. Also about election, like Dr. Chu just mentioned, and Harvey.
Well, I would say Donald Trump's election, taking an American perspective, although it has a global point of view. But also there are other elections, like in Macho, Mexico, the election of a female and a Jewish president. And I would also point to China's historic milestone of successfully collecting and returning samples from the far side of the moon.
All right.
But I have to say, as far as I'm aware, there was no trace of green cheese being found so far.
Right, we'll have more of that part later on. So you all talked about the elections, but of all of them, there are some are definitely more important than others, right? Especially Donald Trump's re-election as U.S. president. So we now go through some major events that would have long-term implications for China and the rest of the world. Shall we start with Harvey?
When you talk about other elections, I think we have to talk about the impeachment of South Korean President Yoon. So, as we say in baseball in America, Yoon's declaration of martial law and his subsequent impeachment was an unforced error. But it one with serious consequences for the Republic of Korea, Korean Peninsula, and for neighboring countries like China and Japan, and the whole world. And I have to say that I'm worried about the implications that come from that, because last week Donald Trump nominated what I would call and what he would call for Democrats a swamp creature from his own deep state, and that's Elbridge Colby to be Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Colby's grandfather, William, was CIA director under Nixon and Ford. He knew where all the bodies were buried, and his grandson is carrying on the family tradition. Even before the Yoon impeachment, Elbridge Colby basically said, screw you to the Republic of Korea. You're on your own. So the question is, which Donald Trump are we going to see? Is it the Donald Trump, the dark Donald Trump, the combative Donald Trump, or is it the wheeling and dealing Donald Trump for which everything is negotiable? I can't predict that. I can only predict that Trump will be unpredictable.
Next to Dr. Chi, what's your pick then, politically, the most influential events of the past year?
Well, if you're talking about the most influential political event, I think no doubt should be the election of Donald Trump. That can be a major change, not only to my dear people in the United States of America, but also it's going to be the great impact towards the rest of the world. I think the influence and the aftermath has already been censored and, very touchingly felt by Australian people, Mexico people, Canadian people, UK people, German people, and letting alone Russian, Iran, Chinese people, and etc. It's going to be a major shift in the paradigm and the orthodoxical, classical political games. We've been seeing the establishment in many of the political arena, not only in America, but also in many other countries, has been influenced. You see how they usually play this game, how they usually act during all kinds of the political debate, Congress, and all kinds of the political events are changed. Basically, you are not supposed to be a seasoned politician. You do not need to show your statesmanship. You do not need to be a shrew man politically, but now you need to show your showmanship. You need to, stand out as a comedian, like a performer, like an internet influencer. So many things changed. You need to have most of your likes instead of getting most of the vote, through the Congress, but also get the likes online. That can make your, political career very, very different from now on. And also, I think this Monroe proposals in American politics are basically reshifting the whole geopolitical overview of the whole world. You can see Americans' relations has been changed with the rest of the world. And in many other parts of the world, we also redefine its role in history as well as in the international politics. So this is, as I mentioned, this is just the beginning, because in the 20th of the January, Trump will actually get into the White House. And only by then you're going to really see and feel the impact of this political tsunami, not only in America, only originated in it, but also to the rest of the world.
It sounds a little bit mind-boggling, but why not, the impeachment of the South Korean president? Like Harvey just mentioned, it's close to China, right?
Well, I think the impeachment is very important and also very melodramatic, but less important. Number one, Korea, South Korea, well, in international politics is still a very, very minor player. And secondly, this is basically an unfinished military martial law, military coup, and also an unsuccessful impeachment. So I don't think that can actually generate the precursor effect that we have already witnessed in 1962, like what happened back in Korea, similar coup, which is already get successful, or in 1978. So it's a quite different story. It shows that in South Korea, their political arrangement, their political institution is basically more matured than 60 years ago or 50 years ago. But also, it shows that Koreans' politics are less in control in their own hands, as long as the bigger nations around them or influencing them has been watching over South Korea politics, and immediately all these melodramatic shows will, be pulled into a pulse.
Right.
So it's not not even in the Korean people say, but it's been decided by multiple factors. Well, that is, I think, is a good epitomization of the small country's politics in today's world.
Yeah, but it's also sufficiently eye-catching already. To Mike, from the British perspective, obviously Donald Trump's re-election is a very important event. And what about others? Like, apart from your own general election, what about the French government's collapse? Would that be a big thing?
I think that was very significant in particular. Obviously, in terms of trade with mainland Europe is still, depends how you measure it, but certainly 40 to 50% of our trade, single European market, and a lot of that will go through France and French ports. So the French economy is vital to the UK economy. So that was very, very significant, most definitely. And I think Keir Starmer and his team will be working very, very closely with that. I think that they're throwing an olive branch out. I think they're very wary of Trump, but they realize they have to work with Trump and listen to him and sit down around the table. And as the panelists have just said, until January the 20th, all we can say is that he's predictably unpredictable, and we'll see what actually ensues. So I think the UK government are looking further afield as well and looking to build better relations, particularly with China. I think those relations have been better, shall we say, in the past, and I think they're looking to smooth over those. I think what's sweeping across the UK still, I'm afraid, is a real sort of anti-immigration feeling that I'm not sure where it comes from. And I think that dominates the thinking, perhaps in mainland Europe as well, where we see still the rise of quite right-wing political factions. So I think the UK government will be looking at that very, very closely and hoping to smooth over some cracks there. Coming back to the impeachment and President Yoon's declaration of martial law, I actually think that proved to be a positive for the South Korean economy. They reacted very, very quickly and very, very effectively to that. So I think that's probably good news for a very mature economy, as been said. But certainly the UK government will be looking very, very closely at France and other European competitors to build relations, better relations over the next year and beyond.
The Chat Lounge. The Chat Lounge unpacks views and opinions on hot issues in a more casual way.
Then, Harvey, economically, what do you think are the most important events of the past year then?
Well, I think economically, the potential of Donald Trump coming back, the tariffs that he's already threatened on China and the rest of the world, this is deeply concerning because of the fact that tariffs were meant to protect domestic industries, but he's going far beyond protection of domestic industries to using tariffs to threaten other countries to change their behavior, whether it's threatening China about fentanyl, whether threatening other countries, Latin America, let's say, about too many immigrants coming across our southern border. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. And I also want to say that I think our whole discussions about the future, because we're looking into the future as well as into the past, have to take into account unforeseen events, black swans events and great rhino events are very important as well, because we don't know what's going to happen And those are the ones that we can't predict. So we have to actually hope for the best, but in many ways prepare for the worst.
Indeed. But over the past 12 months, would you say the U.S. federal interest rate cuts is an important or something remarkable? What it did in September, it's the first time in 4 years, right?
Right.
So
It's I wouldn't say it's remarkable,
mm,
but I would say that it shows that the U.S. and other countries as well have been achieving a relatively soft landing. And so what happened in the U.S. is the Fed now has confidence that inflation is under control, that the economy, while it's not robust, that it's good enough. And I think you could say that in a lot of countries now, and China included, that the economy passes the Goldilocks test. So not too hot and not too cold, but
mm,
just right.
right. And Dr. Chi, how significant is that? Do you think it's sort of bring along some relief for the rest of the world, like countries like China, which is in great need of capital, right?
Well, is that a relief? Basically, if you are watching closely around the capital market around the world recently, you will know that is absolutely not a relief, or at least their gesture is not relieving people.
All right.
Yes, I think the whole world, well, whether the interest rate is high or low is only a comparative concept. It's like in Japan, like 5 years ago, even 1% of the interest rate is too high, or even 0% of the interest rate was still too high. Only negative can match their economy like 5 years ago. And also in Turkey, we will see 15%, or in Argentina, 15% of the interest rate will be too low for their economy. So basically, it's a very comparative idea that we're talking about. If you're saying, yes, another 25 base point interest rate cut, are they good enough? Well, superficially, yes. But comparing to how the economy are going and where the economy is going to be, I don't think this 25% base point and what it stands for next year is good enough for the economy. It's actually not a relief, but more like a mind-boggling, gesture for the next year. Well, European is their economy is, soaring pain. In America, even though soft landing are, looking likely so, well, have been achieved, but blue collars and many other peoples are still screaming for the high rising prices and lower income. And for Asian economies, South Korea, China, and Japan are all yearning for more of the capitals. And even for the Eastern Asian dragons or tigers, they're still, even though they're very prosperous, still going up, but still slow down, dramatically than previous like 5 years. So I think the economy is slowing down globally, including America. So we need more of the interest rate cut. Well, 50 base point of this year, of this month, and another 100 base point cut of the next year. That probably can match the speed of economy we're going to look at next year. But now the Federal Reserve 25 base point and only 2 times rate cut next year. They're much, much behind the expectation of the whole world. So I would like to say it's not a relief. It's more like, in Chinese, we call it 金箍咒. It's more like I tell you to, tighten up your pocket to live a more arduous life,
But at least
that kind of a sign.
At least it's gone on down this path, right? It's on the track toward lowering or further lowering the interest rates.
Well, it's actually in the corridor of the rate cut.
All right.
And as I just mentioned, it depends on how the real economy's growth speed and how your rate can match to that, as I mentioned. Sometimes even you are lowering to 1% or 0% of the interest rate, maybe in 5 years, but maybe the economy is going to go sour maybe in 1 or 2 years. And then a 5-year rate cut period that's just not good enough. Actually, it's a disaster. So it depends on the gesture and the speed and depth.
If you don't think a U.S. Federal Reserve interest rate cuts is heavyweight enough, then what would you say top the list when it comes to economic and trade or finance stories?
Well, I think most important news I'm gonna mark is the Chinese policy combo to boost the Chinese economy.
Right,
As I
especially the
mentioned,
housing
this is not
market and the
only
stock market.
yeah, not only the stock market, the whole policy package at the end of the September and early October, and more to come at the December, November and December. So this end of the year package of China is the most important policy event of the whole economic world because this not only serving Chinese economy but also trying to boost up the largest consumption market of the whole world. It means the stabilization and the double guarantee of the world supply chain of the next year. As I mentioned, many more wars is going to happen, many more natural disasters is going to happen. Who is going to guarantee our supply chain? China. China is going to make sure that our productivities, our transportation connectivities, and our Belt and Road Initiative and our trading partner nations can be protected with certainty and safety. We're still going to make sure food are going to be delivered on many tables. Toys can be put into the hands of many children. Semiconductors can function in many products, and green power like solar and wind can still help these global south nations, especially the least developed nations. This is very important. And also there are 400 million growing middle income class in China, and they're going to be the major purchasing power in the whole world. They're going to be stand with the other major market to shoulder over some major part of the world demand, the world trade, the demand of the next year. So we're going to look into that.
Right.
And if that's not going to happen, and I don't think that's China's problem. It's going to be the whole world problem.
The world actually is watching. Mike, what's your pick then?
You highlighted electric vehicles, the EV market, and the growth and the importance of that now as almost a pillar of the world economy, and the tension, the economic and political tension that there is and that is rising between the UK, Europe, America, and of course China, and the possibility of some sort of protectionist policies that have already been declared and may increase. I think that's something that really needs to be grappled with and handled very, very delicately. I really don't believe in protectionist policies and tariffs. Okay, in the short term, they might have some benefits. In the long term, the costs outweigh the benefits. So certainly policies and hopefully less protectionist economic policies when it comes to the electric vehicle market, and the world has to accept that we have very competitive offerings and brands coming from China and other emerging or developing countries, developing economies that need to be respected. So I think I'd highlight that. It's all quite difficult to prioritize, and there are others. U.S. federal rate cut is very, very important and very significant. But I think I would go with the electric vehicle market, and then we'll see how that unfolds over 2025 and further on.
And another thing I think needs to be highlighted is maybe the global economic growth, which is still subdued, but it shows signs of stable recovery because according to the International Monetary Fund's October 2024 World Economic Outlook, the global growth is expected to remain stable yet underwhelming, with disinflation continuing and a smooth landing within reach. That's good news. And we also see global trade poised to hit an all-time high. That's quite interesting, of nearly $33 trillion this year, with a $1 trillion increase primarily driven by a 7% rise in service trade. So Harvey, what kind of signal does that send out then?
I think the point you just mentioned about the global trade balance is very important because I think it's something that's flying under the radar. So trade in services is outpacing the trade in goods, and it marks really like a sea change in our current economy. So the 7% growth that you mentioned in the services trade compares to what's really an anemic 2% growth in the goods trade. Service trades are dominated by tourism, by the information and communications technology sector, and also the digitally deliverable business sectors, which includes professional business and financial services. And I think as well as China has done in manufacturing, it's also going to be an engine that is driving the global economy in this trade in services. It's not very much talked about yet, but I see it on the horizon. It's coming. And I think China is going to be the major player in that as well.
This has been the Chat Lounge. When we come back, check out more of the key moments in the past year and the outlook of 2025. Don't go away.
The strong wind was howling and whistling.
He was the first Chinese citizen to graduate from Yale University in the mid-19th century.
I was born on the 17th of November. She had prominent features. 3 of us were old enough to lend a helping hand.
He navigated between 2 vastly different cultures and moved further to realize his dream and promote understanding between the people of China and the United States.
Ye Mingxing was a native of Hanyang. I realized no danger. China is really awakening.
Come and join us in discovering the incredible journey of Yong Wang in his autobiography, My Life in China and America. Check out the Audible stories on radio.cgtn.com and all major podcast platforms. Just search for the podcast Books and Beyond and find My Life in China and America.
Welcome back to the Chat Lounge. We continue our review of year 2024. Like Dr. Zhu mentioned, actually China does have its plan for further development in that area, especially trade of services. And moving on to another important field, which is diplomacy. Maybe we start with what's underway most recently, what's going on between China and Japan to ease tensions and improve their bilateral relations. Dr. Qi, would that top your list of diplomatic events?
Diplomatic events. I think China has gotten involved in so many diplomatic events of this year.
Right.
But I think if we're actually talking about one event, I cannot think about it. But if we're talking about one kind of event, I think what's coming into my mind is the visa-free policy. The visa-free policy of China, well, to many other friendly countries, is actually, I think, the most important, policies of all. Because ever since the Chinese reform and opening up, this is for the first time we have this kind of the policy towards the rest of the world. It shows the confidence of the Chinese, government and also relevant authorities towards the world. And also we're trying to honor our commitment towards the world. Not only the confidence of the economy, of the political institutions, but also I think the confidence towards our own culture, towards Chinese, management, like our customs, like our public security, like everything. So it shows that China are getting prepared to reaching out and to the rest of the world to, stand with the world people, tourists, to welcome all kinds of guests, let them enjoy some China moment and have some China cuisine, Chinese culture, savor some Chinese music. So this is very important. Because as President Xi has mentioned, people-to-people exchange is the cornerstone of all kinds of the communication between the nations and the cultures. It's the uttermost important form of the diplomacy and also, people's understanding. So I think that is very important. And I come back to what you mentioned about China and Japan's understanding of each other and improvement of the bilateral relations. I think they both understand that because we are very similar culture entities, China and Japan. We understand the importance of, harmoniously coexist with each other. What does it mean to be a peaceful and a harmonious neighbor with each other? And I think similar arrangement has already been made with Thailand, with Malaysia, with South Korea, and now it's Japan. And Japan also, try to honor their commitment to giving China, multiple entry 10 years visa, based on already existing 3-year and 5-year visa. Right. So I think everybody is trying to run towards the same target. China, made the first move. Okay, I'm going to reaching out the arm. I'm going to welcome you guys, and I'm going to show you my sincerity. And what do you say? And basically every other nation has already reaching back to China. They say, okay, let's hug each other, bro. Let's celebrate this diversity and harmonious environment and a good ambience.
Right.
I think that is how it goes in Eastern Asia. This is gold. Just take a look at the other corners of the whole world. In Middle East, a war, geopolitical conflict, in Europe, extreme politicians, right wing, left wing, in America, and gunfire, suicidal issues. Everywhere we've been getting sick of that. And now in the other end of the continent, you've been looking at good stories of a romance, of a friendship, of an opening up, of reaching out to each other. This is something we need, especially against the current backdrop of war.
It's all good, but it's just I didn't expect you to list it as some diplomatic achievement. But on a second thought, yes, the visa-free policy is to a certain extent a kind of a diplomatic, success, especially for China. Then, to Mike, what's your take then?
I think certainly we're seeing increasing diplomatic relations and diplomatic efforts across parts of the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia. So, for example, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE. We're also, I think this will continue, we've also seen cooperation on a military front between Saudi Arabia and Iran, something that perhaps even a year or two ago people thought would be highly unlikely. So I think, uncertainty and change is certainly something that can happen very, very quickly in parts of the world which are still developing and can integrate very, very quickly. So it shouldn't be a surprise to Western governments that in perhaps even a year or two that there will be very, very strong diplomatic relations across nations which were previously thought to be quite hostile towards each other, particularly North Africa and the Middle East and parts of Asia. So I think that's something that could accelerate very, very quickly. And it's all very well Trump, as he has done, threatening to punish this sort of development, the de-dollarization, for example. But these countries together would be very, very powerful economically and politically. So I think diplomatic relations across Asia are something that could really accelerate very, very quickly, including Japan and China. I think what's driving this is not so much the leadership, sort of slightly older generation, but it's the younger generations who really want to see this and want transparency and want to share in different cultures and work together and travel more. And I think that's what's exciting about the future, the Gen Zs and the millennials. Diplomatic relations will have to follow some surprising changes on the way, I think.
Indeed, I think what you just said actually is best epitomized in the expansion of the BRICS group with Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates becoming new members.
Yeah, it seems like years ago when that term BRICS was first coined, I think it was 2003. And look how things have changed since then. And we used to refer to these countries as developing, and yet when we look across at these countries now, they are very, very much developed. The G20 has really usurped the G8 as a sort of leading economic forum for the global economy. So the balance of power is changing, and hopefully Trump's aware or is made aware of that.
Well, I think talking about BRICS or BRICS Plus, if you want to call it that, because people like Donald Trump are attacking BRICS and threatening it if they try to threaten the dollar, it shows that BRICS is working and that Trump is worried about it. Right. But I believe that BRICS has been very, very successful. And maybe to me, the most successful thing that BRICS has achieved is recent. And that's the rapprochement with India. I think it's a potential game changer. Look at China and India. They used to call it Chindia, the two most populous population-wise countries in the world. And this rapprochement with India is huge because China and India have had some border disputes, and they've flared up from time to time. If these disputes can be put to bed and the countries start cooperating more, I think this would shift the whole geopolitical picture in a major way. And so I'm looking for this trend of rapprochement between the two Chindia countries to continue and strengthen. I don't think that we were talking about this at the beginning of the year, that we could have foreseen this, but we see it now. So BRICS is coming into its own, BRICS Plus, and it's a forum not only for discussing economic issues among these diverse sets of countries, but it's also now a political forum. And it was the forum that allowed China and India to talk about putting this problem of the last few decades to bed and moving on in a synergistic way.
Talking about the rapprochement between, some countries, especially China and other countries, Harvey, do you see this comprehensive turnaround in Sino-Australian relations could be a game-changing event, especially over the past few months, right?
Right, exactly. So a year ago, I was privileged to be in Shanghai for the CIIE,
Mm,
and that was you could see the first flowering of this rapprochement because the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, was there
right.
and spoke very warmly. So yes, I see it, and I see that could be a game changer on a number of different levels. Australia has signed on to this AUKUS faction of Australia and UK and US, which is basically aimed at China, has China in its crosshairs. I could see some moderation coming in that, and the AUKUS arrangement in some ways is already fraying. So I think Australia has really moderated its position. And Australia has a lot of Chinese people living there. And so I think the strengthening is going to happen. And what we've talked about already with the visa-free policies and things like that, and increasing the visits and the people-to-people connectivity is going to be key to furthering the better relations between Australia and China and many other countries. So I think this is all a very positive development.
Mm. And moving on to the technology, Harvey, you've already mentioned the Chinese astronauts bringing back rocks from the moon's far side, but how significant is that? It's just a few rocks, right? How different
Well,
is it from the previous ones,
if you
fetched
look
back
at the
by
few
the
auctions,
Americans?
yeah, well, if you look at the few auctions that have been held about moon rocks that Americans brought back when America was the leader in space back in the 60s, those little moon rocks have fetched enormous amounts of money. But it's not the value in auctions that the moon rocks are going to help humanity with. It's going to be the knowledge that we get about the origins of the universe and also about how we can go out into space and explore space as a new frontier, as a new source of resources that we're depleting on Earth, and in many other spheres, both positive and negative. And so I believe that that is a very important development, and it shows how far China has come in technology. So maybe back here on Earth, we can celebrate the anniversary of Made in China 2025, a plan that was hatched 10 years ago. But we can also talk about the fact that China meticulously plans its future. So the space event is not something that just happened out of thin air. It came from a game plan developed by China's Communist Party leadership and government to take on this role in space, which is our human future,
Mm,
but also in so many other areas. So I just mentioned about the Made in China 2025. China has a plan, and it's achieved this plan because Made in China 2025 is one of China's greatest global achievements. And so they tried back then, and back then China was not such a leading country in manufacturing. They tried to upgrade China's game. So look at some of the dividends. I mean, let's talk about EVs and green energy. China is the leader in EVs and green energy. This is tremendous. China is now the leader in advanced robotics and in manufacturing. So even though the trends are moving from manufacturing to services industry, China is going to be a leader in both. And it's going to be a leader because it has plans. It has Made in China 2025. It has 5-year plans that are much more than propaganda exercises as they were in some other countries some time ago. But these are plans that actually are goal setting exercises. And you can see that something like Made in China has been ultimately successful in most, but not all of its areas. Maybe one area where it hasn't been as successful that China's working on are the chips, the most advanced computer chips, but China is making significant progress there as well. So I think on this front, it's a very positive picture. not only for China, but for all humanity.
The Chat Lounge. The Chat Lounge unpacks views and opinions on hot issues in a more casual way.
Go back to some, concrete achievements made in this technological field globally. Dr. Chi, what would be your pick then?
Well,
What
we have
excited
already
you most?
mentioned about the Chinese moon landing ambition. I think the technology breakthrough actually this year still goes with the AI.
All right.
And I think we have actually commercialized many of the AI applications and AI technologies. Actually, AI became the topic actually early since 2014 to 2015. It's like 10 years ago. It's not a new story, but this year it became really hot. That led to the crazy rise of the NVIDIA. I think back on that, and also many other companies, as well as in China, as well as in many other countries, we all heard about the small version or another little version of the NVIDIA happening in many other countries and many other technology market. I think that reflected one thing, that the whole world is panicking. They're panicking is because AI used to be a theory and then becomes a prototype in the laboratory of the scientists in the universities. Now it becomes something actually, working behind many apps. They have some commercial models been monetized, and so it becomes a thing. I think from all top leadership, not only in China and America, but in many other countries like in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar, in Singapore, in India, they're talking about AI in the top leadership. Of course, talking about the big companies, every big companies. If you're not talking about AI, you're dying. You're dinosaur. So this year, I think is the year we can call the meta year of the application of AI. And many stories is going to come after that, even though we're going to hit the ceiling of a bubble of this round very soon, which means maybe in 2 or 3 years, we're going to see major market collapsing in AI market and hardware and software. That's going to happen. But that doesn't mean AI is dying. That means AI is going to have a very good reshaping and come back stronger, louder, and more dynamically. So in the next 10 years to 15 years, we're going to see the actual result of this meta year of the AI coming into real. And that is very important. Even though we're talking about the retrieving of the rocket, even we're talking about landing on the moon, still this time is going to be different because this time AI is going to get involved.
Right.
Multiple capacity in the calculation, more than human being, more than anything else we can do with only human aid, with only human brain. And that's going to reshift people's voyage into the cosmos in the future. Well, after all, we're just a bunch of, flashes and bones. And we're not going to tolerate the, high Gs. We're not going to tolerate the light years of the travels, but AI can. So this is just a new start. Let's mark this year.
The beginning of a lot of things. And to Mike, very briefly, what would you choose?
When it comes to technology, the United Nations has declared 2025 the International Year of Quantum Science and Technology. So I think the imminent arrival of quantum computers and all that brings, where a quantum computer, just for a brief sum up, uses quantum bits, qubits, not binary bits, a series of naught and ones. So basically a very advanced form of computational calculation that could really handle problems much, much more comprehensively and quickly. So I think quantum science and technology and the arrival of quantum computers within the next 10 years, which we'll talk about more and more over the coming years, which will really revolutionize the world of technology and computing capability. So quantum computing.
That's a milestone, actually. It's really mind-blasting. And another important field is climate and environment. I think Harvey has got a lot to say about this field. 2024 is projected to be the hottest year on record and the first to pass the 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming. And it could be the coolest year of the rest of our lives. That's quite mind-boggling. I would use that word again. Right, Harvey?
Yeah, and it's definitely not a cool thing to think about. So It's true that we've blown past the Paris Climate Agreement goal of keeping global warming to below 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels, and we're on a tear to surpass that. And that's why we're seeing all these horrendous weather events and why it's easy to predict in the future that unless we change course, we're going to blow past them even more, and we're going to threaten our human environment. And when I look back at the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, and see how much dissension there was there, how much developed countries don't want to support the developing world and don't want to pony up for the amount of money that's necessary to make the changes, that I worry. At the same time, countries like China are advancing in terms of new technologies and things like carbon capture that are new frontiers, but the old frontiers of renewable energy are also mainstays of trying to protect our environment. And by having more and more renewable energy, while some countries or some political groupings like the EU and US are pushing back against Chinese advancement, it's really going to be necessary to redouble our efforts in renewables. And China should be given a lot more wiggle room to develop the technologies that are world-breaking, record-breaking in terms of our globe. And otherwise, I think literally we're toast. We're that frog in the hot water that's slowly boiling, and we don't recognize enough that we are going to be dead unless we're able to stop this trend in its track, and it's just going completely in the wrong direction.
You're right. It seems we're doing too little, too slow, and things seem to haven't been on the right track. It's been a lot of years, and it seems the temperature goes on to rise, but it seems what we are doing, it's just futile. Were things turning into a positive direction in the new year then? It's the outlook of 2025. Where's the world heading then? Economically, politically, or environmentally? Will things become worse, or will the world become more deglobalized in 2025? Dr. Chi?
Well, I think this is the cycle of human history. Actually, we cannot do much, even though we think that we should do something. We have nuclear power, we have internet, we have green energy, we have AI. We think we can do something, but we can't. This is the cycle. This is the cycle of human history. We encounter the cycle every 50 to 60 years. This is unchangeable. So instead of trying to think that we can do something, well, we should think about what we can do something to, help ourselves. For example, build our own economy, have a better time with our friends and trading partners, just do our own job. In China, in ancient Chinese philosophy, we have a wisdom is called, in the good sunshine, you go out and farm your land. And in the rainy day with bad weather, you stay at home, put on the cozy, stove fire, and then read some books. And that's it. We have rainy days and sunny days. And now it's the rainy days. It's a long rainy season, will last for another 20 years. And I think what we need to do is that, calm down, have some cup of tea. Well, we have a, different, world right now. Everybody got nuclear power, and nobody's going to have major war against each other. And, we can have some, development within our own home. If the outside world is turbulent, we can tidy our room, read some books, nurture our future generation, raise up the children, and take good care of our elderly. Do whatever we can to make our life easier, happier. That's what we should do, following the spirit of Qiang, following the spirit of ancient Chinese ancestors. And that's how the wisdom helped us to last for 5,000 years continuously. That's the reason why the Chinese nation is the only culture, in a form of a nation will last for 5,000 years without being interrupted. Instead of trying to fight your way back, try to blaze the trail and force your own problem into the other people, another nation, try to transfer your misery into other nations to think that I can change the things for myself. No, you can't. This is the fate. This is what we call yin and yang, and feng and shui. And then after understanding that, you probably will have a better understanding of the whole history, where you are and how you should do the things to welcome all the changes. Because I Ching means the doctrine of changes and how you see and welcome the changes.
Right. You're depicting a grand picture for us, but zooming in to 2025. What's your prediction then?
My prediction for the new year, well, more of the natural disasters, because next year is called the Yi year. Yi year is also the year of the Yi and also the year of the Si, the snake year. It's also the sky clashes with the earth. It's the year of the disaster. We're going to see more of the new geopolitical conflicts to come, like this year. We're going to see more natural disasters. Trump is going to be here. A shattered Middle East is going to bring more of the turbulence into the world. And the world trade is going to suffer from more of the pressures. And as the country, well, in China, I think we have one good advantage, that we're far away from the center of the turbulence. So we need to calm down and, do more of the things to protect our trade, our capacity, our people, and have friendship with our trading partners. And that's the thing we can do, and to welcome the tougher period of time of next year.
All right, then to Mike from the European or UK perspective then.
I think I'll remain optimistic. I think we'll see on an economic front some sluggish growth, but growth nonetheless. So we really have come out of COVID. So I think we will see positive steps in that direction. Coming back to the environmental perspective, I'm actually quite positive here. I think what we'll see more and more is pressure from younger generations in terms of climate control and more sustainable lifestyle, particularly when it comes to consumption and material consumption. And I think that will put pressure on the political sort of leadership in Europe and around the world to alter policies, which at the moment perhaps don't seem attractive. So I think optimistically, from an environmental perspective, I think we will see a healthier planet, a more sustainable way forward, more sustainable philosophy, climate control driven by younger generations who are more and more concerned, more and more determined, more and more informed. So mildly optimistic.
And last but not least, Harvey, please.
My forecast for the next year is, if it was a weather forecast, I'd have to say that it's stormy and cloudy and not very positive. So Charles Dickens wrote a book, and it was called A Tale of Two Cities. In the introduction of A Tale of Two Cities, he said, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And I see that for 2025 as well. And I think it's going to be a lot of uncertainty, and we need to prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And by hoping for the best, we have to do more than hope. We have to be proactive, as we've discussed in our discussion today.
Indeed. And as for me, I just have a very specific wish. The two major conflicts could come to a close next year for the sake of humanity. And on that note, we wrap up today's chat. Many thanks to Harvey Dzodin, Senior Fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, Mike Bastin, Senior Lecturer, University of Southampton, and Dr. Qiang, Fellow of the Belt and Road Research Center, Minzu University of China, for spending the last bit of 2024 at the chat lounge. Send us your comment to radio@cgtn.com. I'm Tuyun. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the holiday season and Happy New Year.
I cannot marry you while your mother regards me.
Step into the world of timeless elegance with Mrs. Spring Fragrance, a captivating audiobook by Edith Eaton, read by Man Ling.
Because the green leaf still clings to the bough.
Experience the lively yet complex lives in Chinese American communities at the turn of the 20th century, as Edith Eaton's delicate prose weaves together themes of tradition, change, love, and identity.
Forget all that belongs to the joy of life.
Follow the journey of Mrs. Spring Fragrance and witness the struggles and fights of those living on a rapidly changing exotic land while holding on to their cultural traditions, or more importantly, to their
He
identities.
could hardly believe that his daughter was seriously opposed to becoming the wife of such a good-looking, prosperous young merchant as Wang Ling.
Join Books and Beyond for Mrs. Spring Fragrance. Let the stories come to life in your imagination. Subscribe to Books and Beyond for free on your favorite podcast platforms or log on to radio.cgtn.com for more.
The best military commander is not he who fights 100 battles and wins every one of them. The best military strategy does not lead to the desiccation of the enemy's capital city. Decoding the Art of War will help you understand why there's no art in war and how Sun Tzu stayed undefeatable using the science of war, with fun stories and insightful breakdown of famous battles. Find Decoding the Art of War wherever you listen.